Good morning. Good morning. How's everybody doing today? All right, everyone's here. Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's webinar. It's called Debunking 5 Budget Myths, Your Roadmap to a Successful 2026 Budget Season. I know your time is valuable, and I want to thank you for showing up today with the intention to lead your communities with clarity and confidence. All right, I want to make sure everyone could hear me. Can you guys write in the chat if you guys could hear me before we get started? Anyone? Hello? Good here? All right. So I'm Michael Manrique. I'm the Director of Business Development and Marketing for Affinity Management Services, and I'll be your host for the next hour. Joining me is Santiago Grossy, who brings a wealth of insight and experience to today's conversation. He's the Director of Client Success for Affinity Management Services. Before we dive in, I want to encourage you to click the link in chat. So there's going to be a link dropped in a second. And I want to invite you to join our exclusive Affinity Management Facebook group. It's a space where board members get to share ideas, ask questions, get support beyond today's session. So go ahead and click that link in chat. It should be coming up. There it is. Go ahead and click that and sign up today. Now, while we wait a few more minutes for everyone to join the webinar, let me ask you guys a question. Can you share your name, how long you've been a board member, and what city are you coming from? So if you could share your name. All right, I see Bruce. How many years or months have you been a board member for, and where are you coming from? All right, we got Bruce with 5 years. We got Donnie with 8 years from Boynton Beach. We got Rob with 8 years from Naples. 15 plus years, Sable HOA. Awesome. Palm Beach, Maria. Great to see you. We got Bruce from Lake Worth. All right, all right. Great to see you guys have tons of experience, it looks like. 10 years, 10 years. Awesome. Well, I'm super happy to have you guys here. I'm sure you guys are going to gain some knowledge. If you guys leave here with one thing, right, it's definitely worth your time being here. So I want to encourage everyone to stay with us until the very end, because we'll be sharing an exclusive opportunity to connect with our team through a personalized session designed to help your board gain clarity, alignment, and strategic direction. This offer is only available for selected associations that share our values and commitment to proactive, transparent leadership. And we'd love to see if you're a fit. Now, throughout the webinar today, we'll be pausing if the time allows, to take questions discussing each myth. So today we're going to be discussing 5 myths, as you know by the title, Debunking 5 Budget Myths, Your Roadmap to a Successful 2026. So we'll be monitoring the chat after we discuss each myth to take a few questions that you guys bring to our attention. Now, today is all about challenging 5 budgeting myths that hold communities back and giving you the tools to lead with confidence. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, I'm Michael Manrique. I'm the Director of Business Development and Marketing for Affinity Management Services. And we are a community association company committed to helping board members lead by aligning to get clarity on what they want to specifically accomplish, execute to hold everyone accountable, and deliver strategically to get consistent results. Today's webinar is part of our ongoing effort to support associations in making smarter, more confident decisions, especially when it comes to budgeting. So why do budgeting myths persist, and how do they impact the communities that they're facing? Well, budgeting myths persist in community associations for a few key reasons. First, many board members inherit outdated practices or assumptions from previous leadership. And without proper onboarding or financial education, those myths become the default. Second, budgeting often feels overwhelming, so shortcuts and familiar habits seem safer than strategic planning. And third, fear of homeowners backlash can lead boards to avoiding the tough conversations, even when increases or changes are necessary. But here's the truth. These myths don't just slow progress. They undermine trust, delay critical investments, and create financial instability. Communities end up reacting to problems instead of planning for growth. And the emotional toll is real. Board members feel frustrated. Community association managers feel unsupported, and homeowners feel disconnected. That's why today's session matters. By challenging these myths, we're just not improving budgets, we're empowering boards to lead with clarity, confidence, and purpose. So let's get right into it. Myth number one, we can just copy last year's budget. What do you think of that, Santiago?
Yeah, it's never a good thing. If you're copying last year's budgets, that means that there was not a lot of homework done behind the scenes to establish what your true costs or potential true costs for the following year will be. Typically, when we see that is because board members want to keep their budgets the same or basically not to increase the budget. Definitely not something that we recommend. We typically like to review the financials, identify any reclassification issues, and establish proper projections based on the budget, based on the financials that we're using. Another thing that we recommend, depending on the association and its goals, is a zero-based budget, which basically we start the budget from scratch. I think that gives you a better perspective as to what you will need for the year. So definitely not copying a budget over. There's a lot of things that you need to take into account. For example, what are the board's directives for the upcoming year? Are there any special projects? How much funding do they currently have? How much cash on hand do they have for those projects? How much are they going to need? Are they willing to wait for the 12 months as we collect those funds to start those projects? So there's a lot of conversations that need to be had months prior to putting that budget together. To kind of establish a true budget that will get the board's priorities accomplished.
Gotcha. Now, let me see. Are there any questions from the audience regarding this myth, just copying last year's budget based on what Santiago just shared? Again, you could just write the question in chat. All right. I don't see any questions. As I like to say, silence is golden. So we'll move on to myth number two. Myth number two is homeowners will never approve an increase. Now, this is a big one. What do you think of this myth?
Well, I'm a homeowner myself. I don't think no homeowners like getting increases. I think what's important is that as the management company and the board goes through their process of identifying how they see the budget for the upcoming year, establishing what are the expenses going to be, establishing any increases, that we educate those homeowners, maybe have a budget workshop where we go over the potential increases and we tie those increases to specific items within the budget so the homeowners see or visualize where those funds are actually going towards and why it's needed. I think the most important part when it comes to that is educating or making that effort to educate homeowners by showing them this is where the monies are allocated to or earmarked to, and this is why that increase is necessary.
Gotcha. So what are like some like best practice to help educate homeowners?
It starts with the board and the management company having those conversations way before the budget is due, is understanding what is it that the board is looking to accomplish for the following year, having those conversations with contractors to identify contract increases, things of that nature, and then scheduling workshops where we have discussions in an open forum where we get the opportunity to educate the homeowners as to those potential increases, things that we've done in the past as well, depending on what the increase is for, is send out newsletters on a weekly basis establishing the process, where we are in the process. It's just being very transparent with it. When it comes to increases, anything relating to funds, the more transparent we are, the better it is.
Gotcha. Question we got from the audience was, when should the planning begin for the budget?
Uh, the sooner the better. There's associations that like to wait until September because they want the latest financials or the most recent financials that covers more than 6 months of the year, so the projections are more in line. But I say the sooner the better, because when you're working on a budget, you're not just focusing on projections. You have to do contract negotiations. You got to see what rates are going up. You got to see if you need to go out for bid for specific contracts. You also want to establish any cash flow issues or liquidity issues to see. You want to take into account bad debt, potential upcoming projects, any deficiencies in that regard. Um, so you definitely want to start it 3-4 months before the end of the year, or if not sooner, depending on how big the budget is and its complexity, to be able to go over all those discussions, identify anything that needs to be identified during that process, and obviously giving the board the opportunity to over communicate with the residents as to what that looks like.
Okay. Another question we got here is it possible to have a different fiscal year other than a calendar year?
Typically, to be honest, that typically falls on the governing documents. Um, the governing documents will stipulate that. So I can't really say, because there's many factors that go into that question. But from what I've seen, typically the governing documents are the ones that dictate that.
Gotcha. All right. Any other questions from the audience regarding myth number 2, which is
Yeah.
homeowners will never approve an increase?
Yeah. Michael, just to add to that,
Mhm.
if a board is interested in changing that dynamic in regards to fiscal and calendar, that's something that maybe they could bring up to their association attorney to review further, to get more clarification from a legal perspective if they could do so or not.
Right. Okay. Let's go ahead and move to myth number 3, which is reserves are optional.
Yeah, the way I look at reserves is kind of like a savings account. As individuals, we have a checking account. Hopefully, we have a savings account and we have some money in there for rainy days. Reserves, I see it in the same manner. When it comes to condominiums, you obviously have many components that over time expire, go bad, and need to be replaced. So ideally, the board members are thinking ahead and thinking in advance and making sure that you have the funding available to avoid any major special assessments or whatnot. Especially with inflation, parts that were $10,000 maybe 5 years ago, they're $25,000 this time around. What I would say is, obviously there's been some statutory changes. So Sears reserves are mandatory because of the issue that happens with Champagne Towers. I think that was needed because from what I encountered is that a lot of board members were either scared or not taking uh, that part of their process as serious as they should have had, to ensure that the building was actually secured in that regard. So reserves shouldn't be optional. I think if the board could save money and use those funds to ensure that the building is upkept the way that it should, that it definitely should be done.
So I got a question here. They're asking to clarify the board approves the budget and the increase and any special assessments. Yeah, so I think there's,
Yes, yeah. For the most part, and again, I'm not an attorney, so I could only say what I know. From the most part, board members are the ones that approve special assessments, are the ones that approve budgets. I've seen in certain cases where membership vote is needed for special assessments. But again, that really depends on your governing documents. And at that point, it becomes more of a legal question more than anything. But for the most part, for the majority, at least for our portfolio, board members, since you do have the fiduciary responsibility, that responsibility falls on the board.
Gotcha. Now, when you were speaking, you were talking about the SERS, and that impacts primarily condos. How do you feel about reserves for HOAs?
Yeah, I mean, definitely different structures. For condominiums, you have more components that require more attention, that will need to be replaced. For HOAs, depending on what those components are. If you have a clubhouse and a pool, obviously the pool comes with pool components. You have AC units, depending on their size, they could be pretty costly. So you definitely want to reserve for those items as well. Again, what the reserves do is that it avoids the board being caught off guard with an expense that they don't have budgeted for the year, having those funds available to address an issue. If your clubhouse gets rented on a weekly basis by homeowners to do little events, and the AC goes bad, and you don't have the funds to fix it, that kind of situation is the kind of situation that you want to avoid as a board member. So having funds available to get those things fixed when the time comes, or replace, better word, it's always recommended.
A
It
question.
avoids
Mhm.
the having to do a special assessment, 14-day notice, and kind of going over that process.
Gotcha. Another question we received from the audience is there a rule of thumb of how much of a percentage should be increased for the reserves?
It typically I mean, if you've done a reserve study, the reserve study typically outlines what that increase would be on a yearly basis based on the components that your community has. So the way that the reserve study is put together is they grab all your components, they establish their useful life, they identify how much funding you already have put aside for those components, and then they establish how much you have to put away every month, with that amount increasing as you get closer to the end date of that life expectancy. So every association has a different number of increase depending on their components and how much money they have already allocated to those components.
Gotcha. Question we got.
Right. And
Mhm,
Michael, sorry, just to add to that,
mhm.
potentially that question comes because back in the days, a couple of years ago, the norm was that board members would just increase the reserves by 10%. That was kind of allowed. Um, uh, and most associations increased it by 10% year over year, but it was not really tied in to a specific component, an actual amount that would take care of that component. It was just more like we're going to increase at 10%. So that's obviously not the way that we would recommend the board members look at that when they're working on their budget. We would recommend them going through the study, identifying what that component will really cost if you needed to replace it, and establishing, do you already have funds for those components already saved up, and how much more you need to become whole.
Got it. And this actually is a great segue to our fourth myth, which is we don't need professional input when implementing a reserve or a budget, I should say.
Yeah, I think input is always necessary. I say this to board members that have accountants on the board. It doesn't matter what your profession or what your skill set is. I think it's always good to have multiple individuals kind of provide some feedback. Again, the board is donating their time, but they have the fiduciary responsibility to ensure that things go the way that they need to go, the way that they need to be, the way that the association needs to be operated. It's never a bad thing to get other individuals' opinions when it comes to not only the reserve process and getting a reserve specialist to kind of go through that process and give you an actual report that provides you with the information you need when you're working on the budget, but also getting feedback from the management company that is running your day to day as to what the budget potentially would be based on projections and based on other discussions with the board members. So it's good to have an open ear, I guess, if you will, to get that feedback from different professionals, and then the board making an educated decision based on that information that they're getting from those parties.
Gotcha. So we got a few questions here. Does the SERS cover elevator costs?
Um, the elevator, it's a major component, so yes, it should cover the elevator replacement costs.
Okay. And then there was a comment here where it stated they collect reserves for insurance and they stipulated as they know it. This is not mandatory, like roads, roof, and paint. If we put too much money into this fund, can we pull it out to cover other items?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics to how is being done at that community, but typically anything that it's under reserves has to stay under reserves. Um, you would need to get a membership vote to remove those funds from the reserve allocated category. So if you had $500,000 in roof and you needed to borrow money from the roofing GL to fix the AC unit that broke and you need to replace it and you don't have enough funds, you typically need to go through a process of getting membership approval of moving those funds from one GL to another, unless you're doing pooled reserves. But at that point, we definitely want to work with the association attorney to make sure that everything's kosher and the board is protected in their decision process. Um, so when it comes to reserves in general, anything that you put in reserves that the homeowners are paying towards as a future expense, typically you need to use it for what it's for. The board cannot just go and remove it from that line item because now they feel that that could be used for something else. Again,
Okay,
it really depends on how that was structured when they initiated that, right? What I would recommend is obviously always talk to the association attorney to make sure that whatever the board does is kosher.
got it. Another question we got was, should a contingency fund be included in the budget and how to calculate that amount, if so?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to contingency funds, I always ask, uh, what do we foresee that fund being needed for, and why wouldn't we just put that money in that line item that we feel may go over, right? A budget is basically a projection. That's why you're always going to have variances in different GLs because you can't foresee what you're going to spend 100%. You're projecting that this is how much I need to run the business for the year, but each category may fluctuate. Um, so having a contingency GL, it's kind of like a mini savings account. I don't say that it's not recommended. It's just really identifying why is it that you need it, and is it better to put it in a different category that you're gonna need instead of having it. And when it comes to the percentage, again, every situation is different as to how you determine how much you want to put there. It's kind of like bad debt. If you have X amount of homeowners that are not paying, how you calculate that as bad debt to ensure that you collect those funds from the rest of the homeowners for those homeowners that are not paying. So
If you're not used to using professionals to help you construct the budget, how would you recommend a board starting that process?
um, if you're not using a professional, well, I mean, the first thing that the board has to do is really understand their financials. So if they're receiving their financials on a monthly basis, looking at the different reports within the financial statement, their balance sheet, how much cash they have on hand, their AP aging report, how much money they have outstanding, how many owners they have delinquent, the income and expense report to identify the variances in each of the line items, understanding if they're currently running a surplus or a deficit year to date. Those are all the things that I would look at to then start establishing, okay, this is what we're going to need to move forward for the coming year. Because as you go through the process, which is something that the manager should be doing on a monthly basis, you might come across a major variance, a major deficit, where you're currently eating through maybe some prepaid prepay payments from homeowners, and you have a major deficit, you need to do a special assessment. So it's very important for financials to be reviewed on a monthly basis to establish any major deficits or surpluses. What I would tell a board that does not have the professional backing is to really review their income and expense, review their AR to identify if they have any major delinquencies, identify their liquidity. So do a liquidity analysis to see if homeowners stop paying the bills for a month, how much money do you have to survive if you were not collecting any fees? And then obviously, if you're doing a projection budget, it's all about projections, how much you spent year to date, and project out to see how much you feel you're going to end the year and establish what that's going to look like for the following year. And if you're doing a zero-based budget, is basically doing it from scratch.
Gotcha. So again, going back to if they're not used to leveraging professionals' help to create their budget, what would you say would be maybe the top 3 professionals they should be reaching out to assist them with that effort?
Well, CPA would be one. Um, the CPA who's doing their books, because if they don't have someone to do their budget, I'm assuming they're self-managed and they don't have a management company. Um, I would hope that the manager who's managing a self-managed community has the acumen to help the board and get that done. But if they don't, I'm also under the assumption that they're using a CPA company to do those financials. I would lean on the CPA to maybe get some guidance as to where they are financially to establish what the budget could look like.
Any other questions from the audience regarding myth number 4? We don't need professional input. Okay. Moving on to the last myth here. The budget is just a CAM's responsibility, a CAM, Community Association Manager's responsibility. So what's the truth when it comes to that?
So yes and no. So the responsibility, technically, if we want to get to the nitty gritty, falls on the responsibility always falls on the board, specifically the treasurer of the board. The manager is there to facilitate the process, and obviously the board, within their powers, they could delegate that task to the manager. So it is expected for the manager to take ownership of putting the budget together, considering that they're the ones handling the day-to-day operations. They're the ones that understand all the little nuances, and they will potentially put a budget together that will be more in line to what will be needed for the following year. So I would say the responsibility falls on the team. And when I say on the team, I mean the manager helping the board accomplish in putting a budget together that is going to meet their liabilities for the coming year. So it is a team effort. Because at the end of the day, the manager has to start having those discussions with the board members way ahead of time. What are you looking to accomplish? Are there any projects that we need to take into account that we could potentially fund for? The manager providing that feedback to the board as to how their cash position is and how that is going to affect their receivables for the coming year. So it has to be an open conversation between the management entity and the board of directors coming together, establishing what they're looking for, and coming up with a budget that is going to meet those expectations.
Got it. And then when it comes to this process, what sort of expectation should the board expect to receive from the manager specifically? Is it just like an Excel document with comments or notes for each line item? Is it something more generic where it's just recommendations and the reason behind it, or what's like a best practice?
Yeah, so I mean, I could only talk for what we do, right? And what we initially do is that we start months in advance having discussions with the board, trying to identify what it is that we want to get done. Once those conversations have been had and we have a clear understanding as to the board's vision and what they're trying to bring forth, then we start working on a budget based on the latest financials. We always try to wait until July, August, September, the latest, because we want to get the most up-to-date information. We even start before then because we need to make sure that we review all the GL classifications, make sure everything is classified correctly because that impacts your projections. And then we put a budget together with projections. We show what the budget is potentially going to be for the upcoming year based on those discussions we've had with the board. And we provide the board with the proposed budget with the financials that were used to put that budget together, and with all our notes as to why something's going up, why something's going down, why we recommend an increase. That way, it's easy for the board to review, and then after that, obviously scheduling a second or third conversation with the board to establish if any changes need to be done.
Gotcha. And typically when, again, in your experience, when we have this discussion about the board's vision, what are some of the key points or questions that we ask to understand that vision so we could implement it in the budget?
Yeah, it's mainly driven on what they're looking to accomplish. Is it more service? Is it if it's an HOA, maybe they want to change something in the monuments. Maybe they want to do better landscaping and they want to budget for it, and they want us to ask the landscaper for a proposal to change from bougainvillea to ficus. Things like that are the things that we start having conversations about as to what they want to improve. Is it more staffing for the clubhouse? Is it that they want to paint the clubhouse a different color? And then once you start having those conversations with the board, more things start coming up, and you start having an open dialogue amongst all the board members. And then we come up with a game plan as to, okay, this is what we want to accomplish for 2026. We go back to the drawing board. When I say we, the management company, and we establish potentially what that would cost. We add it in the budget. We see if it's feasible. We go back and forth with the board, and we come up with a budget that we feel comfortable presenting to the homeowners. And I skipped a few steps. Obviously, if we want to do workshops to have those conversations with the homeowners to show the vision of the board and what they're looking to accomplish and what it may cost, that's obviously something that we do as well.
Gotcha. So can you kind of elaborate further on that workshop? Again, it's the purpose of it is to be transparent, right? Explain the why, if there's going to be an increase or why we're going to focus on a project. What are the best methods to be transparent with the membership based on the board's direction and vision?
Yeah, I mean, for us, what has worked in the past is definitely having a workshop that is solely for that purpose of talking about the upcoming budget, and then showcasing in a factual manner. This is what the budget may look like in 2026. This is what the board is considering. This is where those additional funds are allocated to or earmarked to, and this is what we're trying to accomplish within the first 2 quarters of the year. So your increase is going to be, $15 per door, but those $15 per door are going to do X, Y, and Z within the first 2 quarters. At that point, you're giving those homeowners a visual as to where their money's going, and we're educating them so they don't feel that the money is being spent incorrectly, and then we're having to increase the budget because we didn't have money to begin with. So it's an educational process where the workshop helps kind of visualize what the board's goal is and earmark the dollar amounts as to what those projects are going to be, giving them some sort of timeline as to when those projects are going to be accomplished. And then in addition to that workshop, it's other communications like weekly newsletters as to us having those workshops and things like that.
Those workshops are they like kind of like a town hall setting where the membership
A town
has?
hall, a town hall setting, correct. where we have the budget readily available and the different projects readily available. Depending on the projects, we've had attorneys involved, engineers involved, so the homeowners hear from those professionals that are going to be a part of those projects. If it's a project that is going to be done in 2 quarters, and and we're going to collect those funds, and then we're going to continue to pay for that throughout the 12 months, and we're just going to replenish funds that we already had because maybe we had a surplus at the end of the year. We want those professionals to be able to provide feedback to those homeowners that are present as to this is the project, this is the timeline, this is what it's going to look like, this is what we're looking to accomplish based on the board's vision, and just open it up so the homeowners could, be a part of the process. And I think that's important, them being a part of the process and feeling like getting that buy-in as to, okay, this is where my money's going, and being proud of it. Because if the board is changing the monuments or they're doing better landscaping for the monuments, you want to, as a board member and as a homeowner, you want to feel proud that you're driving into your community and you have this beautiful monuments with landscaping. You're a part of that. And, your visitors are going to see that, your family's going to see that. So it's very important for everybody to be aligned as to what that vision is.
Yeah, another thing I think that's really important is it really insinuates the proactiveness of that meeting. It's not like we're having a meeting and then we're reactive to their questions. It sounds like you have the professionals available, ready to answer questions as to why we're moving in this direction, why we're doing these things. So everyone at the end of the day understands the impact of this change, right? Even if the homeowner doesn't agree with it, at least they have a clear understanding as to what's going to happen and the impact of that.
Absolutely.
Which I think is really important, because fundamentally, when it comes to the budget, a lot of members, homeowners, get it in the mail, and then it's reacting to that letter that they get, right? And then obviously that leads to some sort of friction with the board or friction with the management company, right? Instead of it being an aligned process where we're giving the membership at least an opportunity to speak, not just at the board meeting, but potentially, as you said, this workshop that's prior to it being approved. It allows this feeling of we're all in this together, right? It's a community feel, instead of it just being handed down by the board and there being some sort of lack of alignment or feeling like it's a team effort when it comes to these changes to the budget.
Correct. And again, when you're looking at it from an HOA perspective, the board ultimately makes the decisions on what they're changing. But it's about having that clear communication. When you're in a condo, it's a bit different, because if you're doing a budget and you're taking into account projects that alter the appearance of the common areas, there's a bigger process to that, right? Like, you need owners to be more involved. They need to agree and vote towards those changes, and it's just a different dynamics altogether, right? But again, I think when you look at HOAs and condos, the key thing here is communicating with the homeowners, letting them be a part of that process, or at least have the opportunity to be a part of that process, where it's open and honest conversation, and they see the board's efforts to be proactive in putting a budget that is gonna bring that vision forward as to what the community should be, right? We're always trying to improve that community.
So can you talk a little bit about, because this myth, just to recap it, is the budget is just a CAM's responsibility, right? We talked about how, it's not just the CAM's responsibility, but fundamentally the CAM should have, at least based on how we handle our business and the expectations we have with our CAMs. Talk about the accountability to support the CAM in finalizing that budget.
When you support the CAM from the board perspective and their involvement, or in general? Because there's obviously two different types of support, right? It's the support that your potential management company is providing that individual,
right.
Making sure that they have the tools to facilitate a budget and a process that will set up the board for success, right? So that's the corporate side of the management company working directly with that manager, making sure the manager has the acumen to think about all the things that they need to think about when they're going through their process. So when the product is delivered to the board has something that is actually viable and that they could have true discussions with. And then you have the side of the board, which is the most important part, if you ask me, because the budget is really a reflection of what the board is looking to accomplish. It's not just about a paper with a bunch of numbers, it's more of a vision and a accountability tool to ensure that everybody's being held accountable to what we want to do for the year. So it's not just about paying the day-to-day bills, making sure that the lights are on, making sure that the pool company is getting paid, is more of what other things are we looking to get done throughout the year, having the funding for that, and making sure that there's some sort of accountability as to this is when we're going to get it done. This is what it's going to look like. This is how it's going to impact the homeowners. This is how much it's going to cost. And this is the end result.
Yeah. I think a scenario that happens quite often that I hear from board members is maybe their budget being done at the last minute, right? So again, the CAM is feeling siloed, or they're by themselves in their effort to try to solve all the problems, and for whatever reason things fall through the cracks. So from that scenario specifically, how do we make sure that doesn't happen with our team?
Yeah. So when it comes to our expectations, um, the manager is expected to have the budget draft by a certain time frame. And our goal, again, as managers, it should be to facilitate and to give that information to the board so they can make their decisions, what I called educated decisions, right? So it's really up to the manager to provide the board with a budget, with their recommendations and timelines as to not only, well, recommendations on the budget, recommendations on the next steps, and due dates as to how we move forward to finally getting that budget approved with the homeowners. Now, the responsibility falls on the board, and it always falls on the board to make sure that those things are done. The manager should facilitate, should educate the board, should make sure that the board members are aware of specific statutory deadlines and things of that nature. But ultimately, the board is the one that needs to make sure that they meet those obligations. It's important for the manager to be their cheerleader and their facilitator and their educator in some instances to make sure that they meet those requirements.
Gotcha. Any other questions from the audience regarding the fifth myth? The budget is just a CAM responsibility. There was a comment here that stipulated websites will be compulsory on January 1st, 2026, and it's a nice way to engage with the community. Yeah, absolutely, it is. Unfortunately, not many homeowners, are looking at websites, let alone the mail, right? So a lot of the times they'll hear about things at the last minute. So ideally what we want to do is leverage every methodology we have to engage with the membership, to make them aware of changes. And the more opportunities we have to communicate with them, the more they feel that they're part of the process, even though they're not making the decision at the end of the day. So
Definitely. Yeah, I mean we've been doing websites for our communities for years now, even before they became regulated. Even for our HOAs, our condos, they all have websites just because we like that transparency component, and that's kind of the conversations that we have with our partners when we're taking over a community, is the benefit of having an association website and what it means to the homeowners. But we definitely don't rely just on that to facilitate some sort of transparency mechanism or communication. There's different things that we do. Obviously, the board is the one that directs us, and if as long as they're okay with it, if we're having a meeting with the board and we're posting the 48-hour notice, depending on the meeting, we also send e-blasts to the community. We send different informations via e-blast to make sure that we try to capture as many homeowners as possible. And again, it's all to be transparent and to educate. Most of the time, homeowners don't attend meetings unless it's something that is affecting them personally. But we do go above and beyond to ensure that they understand that we're trying to be transparent, either through the website or e-blast communications or weekly newsletters and things like that.
So sticking with this myth that the budget is just a CAM's responsibility, talk to me about what is the, maybe in your experience, the average amount of time that the board or the treasurer should allocate for this budgeting process alone? Because I hear at times that there's board members spending, I don't know, 40 hours a week even on their association, and it's not even when it's budget season. So what do you think is an appropriate time for the board to spend to kind of work on the budget and finalize it?
I mean, honestly, it depends on the association, it depends on the budget, but really the management company or the manager who's a reflection of the management company should already be providing that information to the board, where the board is only reviewing it. I would see the board taking a couple hours if they had to put a budget together from scratch or they had to do the work themselves. But ideally, the discussions take place months in advance, and then the manager is providing the board with a fully established budget with all the necessary recommendations, taking into account all the board's visions for the upcoming year. And then at that point is more of just asking questions. Hey, this GL item, I saw that you budgeted an additional $5,000. Can you kind of give me a better explanation as to why? This line item you under budgeted, can you explain? And that's the conversation that the board should have with the manager at that point. It shouldn't be them putting the budget together. It should be more of getting clarification so they feel comfortable that the budget that they're putting out for approval is one that they feel is adequate to meet the goals of the association.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you very much. All right. So before we close today's session, let's quickly recap the 5 budget myths that we tackled. So copying last year's budget isn't a strategy. It's a shortcut that can cost your community. Homeowners, number 2, homeowners can support increases when they understand the why, right? Number 3, reserves aren't optional. They're really your safety net. Number 4, professional input isn't a luxury. It's really a necessity. And number 5, budgeting is a team sport. It's not just the CAM's job. Now, if today's session resonated with you, I want to invite you to take the next step by clicking the link in the chat. We know board members often face 3 major challenges. That's overextending their personal time, energy, and effort on the association's behalf. I know so often board members often find themselves sacrificing personal hours to manage association responsibilities, leading to burnout, frustration, especially when progress feels slow or unsupported. Number 2, lack of accountability and strategic follow-through. This is another major challenge that I hear about. Without clear roles, systems, and consistency, even well-intentioned goals can stall. This creates tension, erodes trust, and prevents the board from delivering a meaningful results for the community. And number 3, the third biggest challenge that board members face is reactive management and budgeting. Too often boards are forced to respond to crises instead of planning proactively. This reactive approach leads to rushed decisions, missed opportunities, and financial instability that could have been avoided with the right tools and foresight. This is a systemic problem that impacts most associations at one point or another. If you can relate to those frustrating challenges, we're offering a limited number of financial health checks and vision setting sessions. These are designed to help the board gain clarity, build alignment, and plan proactively to have a successful 2026. Please note, these sessions are only available to select associations that share our values, which are they communicate that that they're open to communicating, that prioritize transparency, collaboration, and long-term success. If that sounds like your board, we'd love to connect. We can't do this for every association, so spots are limited. So don't wait. Reserve your session today by clicking on the link below in the chat, and let's build something great together. Thank you again for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, everybody.